meeting to order. Procedural notes. This meeting will be held electronically as per section 19, one of the town's procedural bylaw, number 6228-19, as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Council Gilliland, seconded by Council Kim. Any comments, questions? Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Recorded vote for the approval of the agenda motion on this evening's agenda. Councillor Thompson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Gallo?
Yes.
Councillor Kim?
Yes.
Councillor Gilliland?
Yes.
Councillor Gartner is absent. Councillor Humphries is absent. Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Well, welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the town-initiated housekeeping amendment to the comprehensive zoning bylaw 6000-17. For the matter being considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1, town planning staff will outline the purpose of the housekeeping amendment to the zoning bylaw. 2, following this presentation, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the item virtually. And 3, town staff will answer your questions. I'll keep track of the questions, and when I have several, I will direct them to whoever can best answer them. It's very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, complete an interested party form available on the town's website at aurora.ca/planning notices, or contact Planning and Development Services by email at planning@aurora.ca. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the local planning appeal tribunal. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Names, addresses, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 4.1, PDS 21-033, town-initiated housekeeping amendment to the comprehensive zoning bylaw, being number 6000-17. A notice of public planning meeting was published in the local newspapers, posted on the town's public notices webpage, and also posted on social media. The notice was also emailed via the town's monthly broadcast email, as well as provided to all interested parties. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentation. Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start. It's only one presentation tonight, and that's our Senior Policy Planner, Edward Terry, who will be presenting on the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Terry, floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor Maracus, members of council and the public. My name is Edward Terry, and I am a senior planner with the Planning Department. Today's presentation is regarding a town-initiated zoning bylaw amendment to address some housekeeping items. So to provide some background, Section 34 of the Planning Act grants municipalities the power to pass a zoning bylaw as well as subsequent amendments to the document. In September of 2020, staff received direction to present a town-initiated amendment to the comprehensive zoning bylaw. After months of research and internal consultation, on February 2nd, 2021, staff received further direction to proceed with a public meeting to consider housekeeping amendments to the zoning bylaw. Since the implementation of the zoning bylaw, staff have strived to ensure that the document is monitored so that it remains relevant, implementing the intent, and any corrections are completed in a timely manner. Staff conducted a municipal scan of 7 GTA municipalities regarding landscape strips standards. Based on that review, a 3-meter landscape strip was the most common standard. Staff are proposing the following revisions to the town zoning bylaw. A minimum 3-meter wide continuous landscaping strip on the front and side lot line of any lot that has a frontage of 15 meters or more. For lots with a frontage of less than 15 meters, a minimum 2-meter wide continuous landscaping strip is proposed on the front and side lot line. Where their rear lot line of any lot in a non-residential zone abuts a lot in a residential zone, a minimum 3-meter wide continuous landscaping strip is proposed along the abutting lot line of the lot. And properties with 0 front yard or side yard requirements are exempt from providing a landscaping strip. In review of a number of site plans for the new buildings in the Addison Hall employment area, the applicants were required to apply for a minor variance to increase the maximum driveway width to safely accommodate truck turning movements where 2 driveways are planned for access. To avoid delays in processing applications and to facilitate the safe movement of larger vehicles, staff are proposing that driveways exclusively serving a loading space or serving a building in an employment zone may have 1 or more one-way lanes. Each lane is to have a minimum width of 3.5 meters and a maximum width of 6.5 meters. The minimum and maximum width of the driveways will be measured at the street line. Another housekeeping item is regarding rounding numbers. The zoning bylaw needs a methodology for rounding up or down numbers to provide consistency for interpretations. And also the bylaw proposes enabling staff to correct minor technical errors without having to undertake a zoning bylaw amendment, provided that the purpose, effect, intent, meaning, and substance of the bylaw are in no way affected. The following minor technical revisions to the bylaw are proposed to be permitted without a zoning amendment. Changes to the numbering, cross-referencing, format and arrangement of text, tables, schedules, and maps. Additions to and revisions of technical information on maps and schedules, including but not limited to infrastructure and topographic information, notes, legends, shading, and title blocks. Alterations of punctuation and language, and corrections of grammatical, demonstrational, boundary, mathematical, or typographic errors. Regarding public comments, members of the development community have requested clarification regarding proposed landscape strip policy, mostly for ground-related residential. Staff will be revisiting the proposed policy wording regarding ground-related residential to clarify our intent prior to a future staff report to General Committee. To clarify, the proposed provisions also applies to multi-residential zones with more than 4 units that abut a residential zone. This provision does not apply to singles and semis, as the zoning bylaw currently provides a 6-meter front yard setback or more on private property. The requirement for a privacy fence or a berm is proposed to be replaced with a wider landscape strip of 2 or 3 meters for tree planting purposes. If the provision comes into force, it can be amended by a minor variance or a rezoning amendment to reduce the width of the landscape strip by providing an alternative method such as a fence, wall, or berm. Staff will be adding a clause to the draft bylaw to capture pre-existing situations where a landscape strip is less than the proposed provision. And staff will be amending the definition of a landscape strip in the zoning bylaw to clarify it's primarily intended for trees, but can also accommodate hardscapes such as retaining walls, patio stones, etc. The purpose of the housekeeping amendment will help ensure that zoning bylaw remains relevant and implements the town's intent for the official plan. And just to get into next steps, staff will address any comments from this public meeting, provide a report to the General Committee in June, present a zoning bylaw amendment to Council for final adoption in July, and update the zoning bylaw in accordance with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Mr. Clerk, do we have any members of the public?
To you, Mr. Mayor, not this evening. No one signed up to speak at this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Council, I am going to ask for a mover and a seconder to the recommendation and then ask for any comments, questions to the presentation and to the report. So we have 4.1, which is the town initiated housekeeping amendment to comprehensive zoning bylaw 6000-17. The recommendation is one, that report number PDS 21-033 be received. Two, that comments presented at the public meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services in a report to a future general committee meeting. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Councilor Gilliland, second by Councilor Thompson. Any comments or questions to the report or the presentation? Councilor Gilliland.
Thank you. Just quickly, in case I had missed the email, but I did read an email about the word residential or multi-residential from one of a letter that was sent to us. And I was wondering, has that been reflected in this presentation or in this report? We were supposed to have some sort of revision. Mr. Waters, I am assuming that you had suggested it was an error.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we had forgotten to add the word multiple before residential in the draft bylaw, and that will be corrected prior to presenting it to council at a future GC meeting.
Councilor?
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to recognize that and understand that will be reflected on the report to GC. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Gallo?
Thank you. And just on that note, through to Mr. Waters. So the other examples that you provided don't speak to, I don't think, at least some of them, multi-residential. And it's also not in, wording isn't in the chart on attachment 1. I'm just wondering why in the proposed revision, the new wording isn't in there. I see it in the bylaw, but it's not in that chart.
Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Which chart are you referring to, Councilor Gallo?
Attachment 1, where it shows the existing bylaw and then the proposed bylaws and the staff comments.
Right. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we discovered the error after the agenda was printed.
Council?
All I'm saying is that entire preamble isn't part of the proposed revision. It is part of the bylaw later down on the agenda, but it's not. You see the old one, and the only word difference is, I guess, non-residential. Anyways, if someone's looking at this, comparing the existing one and the old one, they would have to look at the bylaw at the end of the agenda to actually see that what we're changing or what is being proposed in terms of non-residential. And anyways, it should have probably been in that chart under the proposed revisions. The examples that are given, are any of them the same as what is being proposed in terms of abutting residential or single detached? The difference is residential versus multiple residential.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so the purpose of the landscaping strip is to provide a proper separation between different densities, which is why multiple residential is it was referenced in the original section 4.8 and unfortunately was left out in the draft bylaw that's before you today, part of public planning. So it's essentially to deal with the transition of densities and to provide the appropriate screening for that.
Councilor?
Thank you. Through you, I guess my question, I wasn't clear. The examples, the comparisons that you gave us, Ajax, Newmarket, Vaughan, et cetera. Are they in line with the multiple residential or residential in general?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they're generally landscape strip standards or provisions in their general provisions section. So they're not site-specific standards. However, they generally do we do reflect what is out there in the GTA. For example, mixed use is referenced in the Ajax example that we benchmarked.
Council?
Okay, I'm just trying to see whether or not we're aligning ourselves with other municipalities in terms of all residential or multi-use residential. I see Barrie and some of the others. Vaughan just says residential zone, not multi, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Councilor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, Mr. Waters. My main concern last time when this came to the council on an agenda was the 3-meter planting strip. Since then I've learned that 3 meters is enough as long as the right soil conditions are put into place. So would those soil conditions be part of something else? Would they be part of, well, it wouldn't be part of the zoning bylaw. Where would they show?
Mr. Waters?
For you, Mr. Mayor, those standards will be part of the landscaping guidelines that Parks uses for tree planting.
Thank you. You mentioned Ajax, and Ajax is saying, seems to be, I won't say proper, but seems to be necessary. When you have a landscaping strip, Ajax says that buffer shall not be used for any other purpose. Ours is saying something different. Ours is saying that we can put a retaining wall on it. Correct me if I'm wrong. The problem with that is by the time you put a retaining wall on it and you do the that special material that's required, there's no room left to do trees. So could you comment on that?
Mr. Waters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Gardner, you're quite correct, which is why we're suggesting that the definition in the zoning bylaw for landscape strip be revised to say that it's mostly for trees, but where there are no trees planted, it should not preclude any of the hardscaping that's required, but it should primarily be for the planting of trees.
Councilor?
Thank you. But couldn't we get into trouble with that? Because if it seems to me that everybody is talking about putting these landscaping strips down so we can plant trees. So what if a developer says, I need a retaining wall and I don't want to plant the trees? I don't think the trees and the environment should take a fall for that. I think that the developer should figure out how to do retaining wall on another part of their property. Unless I'm not visioning this correctly, but shouldn't we insist that the 3-meter strip is used for planting?
Waters?
For you, Mr. Mayor, there may be situations where it may make sense to have some hardscaping within a landscape strip, but the primary purpose would be for tree planting, no question about it. In some cases, developments, there's competing interests, I guess, at the end of the day for various pieces of infrastructure, whether they be soft infrastructure or hard infrastructure. So we're just recognizing that, not every situation is the same, and that there may be instances where you can accommodate some of this hardscaping within the landscape strip, but definitely the primary use is for tree planting.
Councilor?
Thank you. again, I may be wrong on this, but hardscaping to me means something that has a hard surface. It's going to have a concrete or whatever hard surface on it. I see that developers might want to put an entryway concrete sign into their subdivisions, as we have in many subdivisions already, that says such and such subdivision. That's a very small piece of hard surface that would be required. But retaining wall could be a long, it could be a long area that's required.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think your example of entranceways or gateways is a good example of an appropriate use to sort of implement within a landscape strip. But a retaining wall that would run the length of it is inappropriate, and I agree with you on that. But again, in my view, I think you should provide the opportunity for these hardscaping features to be included if it makes sense and if it doesn't impact the tree planting. But the way the definition reads now, there's no controls on landscapes, on hardscaping with the landscape strips. You could populate the whole strip with hardscaping, the way the bylaw reads today with the definition in it.
Council?
And so the opposite of that, the way the bylaw is now going to read is that is not going to happen.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we're proposing is that tree planting is the primary use, but we're not precluding those types of features, hardscaping features, from being introduced in the appropriate locations where they don't impact the tree planting.
Council?
Okay. So we know how valuable land is and space and developments. So if somebody came in and said, listen, the only way I can do this development is to put a retaining wall along whatever, 20 meters of this property. That's the only way I can do this development. So are we going to say no to that? Are we going to say, no, you'll have to figure it out on your property outside of the 3 meters? What is in this bylaw to prevent that?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what's in the proposed bylaw will be worrying that doesn't preclude it unless we're given direction to preclude it from council. But again, I'm of the approach where we should try to work together and collaborate with applicants to come up with the best solution, and recognize that our main priority is for tree planting, and if we can accommodate other pieces of infrastructure, hardscaping rather, within that strip, then we'll try to do that, but it shouldn't come at the cost of tree planting.
Councilor?
Am I running out of time?
Aye.
How am I for time?
Mr. Clerk?
A minute and a half left, Councillor Gardner.
Okay, so I guess I'll just finish this. And I don't know how to say this in a polite way to Mr. Waters and to council. I think that there are some community values that need to come before any developer's requirements. And I think that is the planting of trees. And I think this bylaw needs somehow to say that, so we don't get into a situation where a developer comes and asks for lenience that would be an advantage to them, but would be a disadvantage to the community, i.e. we need the trees. So far I haven't heard how that, this is certainly better than what was there, but so far I haven't heard how this bylaw is going to mandate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments or questions? Councilor Gardner, second time?
Thank you. The other concern I had, and I can give an example, there's a few, not many in town so far, where you've got residential abutting commercial. So where the Metro Plaza is, where the No Frills Plaza is, there are landscaping strips that either weren't sufficiently wide, or they weren't sufficiently, the soil wasn't remediated, or the developer, or there's nothing in the bylaw that says a developer has to maintain the viability of the trees. So at the back of, it's actually the side of No Frills that borders on that apartment building, all those trees have died. In the Metro Plaza, most of those trees abutting residential have died. And so I would like to know what we can do to ensure that doesn't happen. We may not have another situation like this, but landscaping strips are also buffers between residential and non-residential. I noted in the bylaw, it says 3 meters, the 3 meter strip. That would be fine. In the, can we put something into the bylaw that says the plantings that are required to fulfill the site plan grant, that those trees need to be maintained by a developer?
Mr. Waters? Waters, you're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe that wording is appropriate for a zoning bylaw. That's more of an agreement.
Councillor?
Okay, I'll leave that for the moment. The other thing, it says that in 4.8, it says that driveways can cross that 3 meter strip. So again, you've got residential abutting non-residential. If that 3 meter buffer is there to screen the non-residential from the residential, are we going to allow a driveway through that kind of an area?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we would, because some properties are greater than 15 meters and require access to a public road. So we would, I believe that is a common standard in all bylaws, and we have that in our current zoning bylaw as well.
Councillor?
Thank you. I noted that Ajax has got, no, I think it's Bradford, West Gwillimbury. They've got 3 meter planting strips abutting a street line, a 10 meter or wide street. On a 10 meter or wide street, they have certain restrictions. So we have in town, I don't know if that's an arterial road or not, we have in town, for example, St. John's Side Road, we have allowed residential on both sides of St. John's Side Road. And we haven't required, I mean, there's no substantial planting that we've required by the developer. Is there a way that we can ensure that? I mean, our residents, these are future residents, they're not there to talk about the noise and any other repercussions from the traffic on streets like St. John's Side Road. So is there anything that we can do to protect those future neighbors with respect to buffer strip and plantings on that buffer strip?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you're, Councillor, are you referring to the north side of St. John's west of Yonge? The Shining Hills development?
No. I'm actually, the one that I saw was the south side of St. John's, east of Bayview, just closer to Leslie than Bayview, but halfway in between. We've got window streets and there's a buffer along St. John's, and then there's a sidewalk and there's another buffer. And there's really, the residents are at the mercy of the traffic noise. Is there anything that we can require through our zoning bylaw to protect, in this case, it's too late for these residents, but future residents coming in?
Waters?
For you, Mr. Mayor, what we've done, for instance, on Shining Hills Phase 2 is require a 3 meter landscape strip parallel to St. John's Side Road, which will be used for tree planting and other landscaping purposes.
Councillor?
Thank you. So this great. This is on the Shining Hills property.
Correct. Sorry,
It's-
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Waters.
That's
So
correct,
how-
Councillor Gardner.
Are we requiring, like, are we gonna put these trees that blow in the wind? Are we putting 6 or 8 meet evergreens? What are we requiring there? Is there a requirement?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I can't give you the specific tree species. That'd be our parks group will be able to indicate that for you. However, there's a landscape strip and it will be used for screening the homes abutting St. John Side Road.
So that would be up to landscaping to our, that department to say, you've got to put X, Y, and Z.
That's correct. They would have a list of species that were based on the location.
Councillor?
I'm thinking more about the size of the trees, whatever species they are. Would that also be up to landscaping?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct, Councillor Gardner.
Councillor?
Thank you. And is there anything, you said it has to be in the agreement. Is there any other way to say that those trees have to be, they're on the Shining Hill property? Is there anything to say you have to keep these trees viable? Because there's going to be a lot of traffic and pollutants in that area.
Councillor, this is, you're at time, so I'll give this as your last question. Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that phase 2 development is a condo development. So we could add the appropriate condition within the condo agreement to acquire that type of landscaping be maintained.
I have a point of order. Councillor Gillen?
Hi, sorry, you said it was the last question, so I was going to leave it, but I just kind of felt that we were kind of going off topic with Shining Hill. I didn't really feel it was kind of the same thing. I just felt it was a conversation we taken offline.
Sorry, I don't,
I'll allow that last question just because we're still in regards to buffers and landscaping strips. So
thank you,
That's
Mr. Mayor,
why-
but I don't care where it is, where in town it is.
I appreciate that. And I know it was kind of getting into one specific application.
Yeah.
But it's fine. Mr. Waters, you can finish up and then we'll move on to
Okay.
any other comments or questions. Mr. Waters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gardner, I would say that we would add a condition to the condo agreement for that development to enable the trees to be maintained by the condo corp, and that if they need to be replaced, their responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Mr. Clerk, call a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Record vote for the only item on this evening's agenda. Councillor Gallo, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Gilliland?
Yes.
Councillor Humphries?
Yes.
Councillor Gardner?
Yes,
Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Councillor Kim?
Yes.
And Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Confirming bylaw. I'd like to move that. Councillor Kim, Councillor Humphries, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Record vote for the confirming bylaw. Mayor Maracus, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Gardner?
yes,
Councillor Gallo?
Yes.
Councillor Kim?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Councillor Gilliland?
Yes.
And Councillor Humphries?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Thompson and Councillor Gallo. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.